Have you ever been in a situation where you're working with a buyer and you finally find them the perfect house, right? And then you go to submit that offer, you think everything's fine because there's no other offers. Then the next morning, listing agent hits you with that message. House was so great, obviously. 3 more offers come in, and now the seller wants the highest and best. Well, I've been there tons of times, and let me tell you, absolutely nothing is worse than having to call up your buyer and let them know that their offer was not the winning offer. It can literally be so stressful for some buyers that it's actually the tipping point that pushes them over the edge of deciding that they don't even want to buy anymore because it's just too much heartache and too much heartbreak. Especially in 2021, we were doing like 10 offers per person, and it was taking like 7 to 10 offers to finally get one accepted. So I've been there lots of times, and by the end of this video, I'm going to teach you the 3 tricks that I learned that you can throw in an offer to give you the absolute best chance of winning that multiple offer situation. Now, I just closed a house about 2 weeks ago, and that lead actually came in from a separate YouTube channel that I made that was supposed to attract inbound buyers. So look, ended up working. Very cool. But that whole YouTube channel and that lead generation thing, that is a video for another time. This one is just about submitting offers. Now, just like I said in the intro, that's exactly what happened. That was not hyperbole at all. When we submitted the offer, we were the first offer and everything was fine. We were just chilling. And then the next day we get a text from the listing agent saying that there are 3 other offers on the table because obviously the house was so great and it was priced well. And the seller was asking for highest and best. So at that point, I knew it was time to rethink our strategy and go with my super winning offer, right? And the original offer that we sent over, it was just very clean. I suggested that we just go slightly above asking price to hopefully try to coax them into accepting the offer early before anything else came in, but that strategy didn't work. So now there's multiple offers. Now we have to submit a new offer that can win against the 3 offers. So here are the 3 things that we did to make that offer really stand out. Now, before I go through these 3 offer hacks, I just want to make it very, very clear that I had a specific conversation about each single one of these items. And I said, look, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is what I want to add to the offer. Here's the negatives. Here's the downsides. Here's why I think it's going to make the offer more competitive. Here's why it might cost a little bit more money. So before you add any of these to your offer, make sure you actually have a conversation with the buyer and they fully understand what's going on. So the very first thing that we added was an appraisal gap. The appraisal gaps became really, really popular in 2021, at least in this area, because we were getting a ton of low appraisals coming in, right? So what the appraisal gap looks like is it essentially sounds like this. And I just put this in the additional comments. I don't need an extra addendum or anything like that. It says something like, in the event of a low appraisal, buyer agrees to pay up to $10,000 over appraised amount, not to exceed the contract price. So there's a few key details in there. The first one being the qualifier of if the appraisal comes back low. The second very important part in there is the actual amount that you're going to increase the appraised value by, right? So this is, in our example that we used for this offer, it was $10,000. So if the appraisal comes in $10,000 below what the contract price is, this particular buyer was actually willing to cover that gap in cash. And then I have that little note at the end of that entire statement just to make sure that everyone's clear the buyer's not going to pay more than the contract amount. So here's why in this particular situation, I was totally fine with having the buyer do the appraisal gap. Looking at the comps and just having a pretty good understanding of the area, I knew, well, I didn't know for 100% certainty, but if I'm a betting man and I bet in that situation, and I bet we are not even going to be close to coming in low on the appraisal. Even offering over list price, I was pretty sure that we were going to be good. So I said, look, I think we should do $10,000 appraisal gap, and I don't think it's ever going to come up, but it's going to make the offer look stronger. So it was kind of like not really a bluff, but we were just throwing it out there and ended up working. Second thing we added in there is a post-closing occupancy for the seller. So the buyer is relocating into town, right? And the seller, obviously, they're trying to sell their house and then they want to move to the new area and they want to use their funds to purchase the new house. So to make everything a little bit easier, and we did use an additional addendum for this and a lease, right? So you can't just put this in the additional comments, but we offered the seller to be able to stay in the house for a week after the house closes for no fees. This obviously looks very attractive for the seller because they have a place to stay after the house closes, and then they can get ready to close on their next house, and they can have an extra day of fluff on either end to make sure that the house is all packed up and it's all cleaned, and it takes a lot of stress off the seller. Now, obviously there is some risk involved there, so I've done a lot of these. Some of them you can do them with no deposit. You can also offer that the seller holds like a security deposit in escrow until everyone has conducted a final walkthrough after the seller moves out. So that's another potential possible route you could go. With or without the security deposit, that is just a conversation that you're going to have with your buyer and see what they're comfortable with. Just make sure everyone's in the loop and make sure that everybody gets the utilities switched over on the correct days. But other than that, it's really not too complicated. All right, the third hack, and this is the real spicy one. We learned this one in the heat when everything was going crazy in the housing market down here. This is, again, mid-2021 when things were just popping off like crazy. This one is an escalation clause, and there are specific addendums you can use for this. And I used to use the addendum, but honestly, I just think that they're too complicated. So what I do is I just put it right in the additional comments, and that has been fine. So there's two different ways that you can kind of write these escalation clauses, and I'll go through both of them and the differences, but it basically looks something like this. Buyer agrees to pay $2,000 over next competing offer not to exceed a maximum purchase price of X. So in our scenario, this house was originally listed at $325,000. And I suggested that we start at a base price of 5 over that, so $330,000. And what I suggested was, and this is through a conversation with the buyer, and they agreed on it. So what we want to do is agree on two different points. First one is how much over the next competing offer do we put in our offer. So in this particular scenario, we did $2,000 over next competing offer. So you want it to be enough where it actually makes sense for the seller to pick that one, but you don't want to go too high because then you're offering more money than you need to. So in our particular scenario, we offered to go $2,000 over next competing offer, not to exceed a maximum purchase price of $340,000, which ended up being at the end $15,000 over the original list price. I know that's a lot of numbers, but I hope you're following me so far. The whole point of the escalation clause is not so that we offer $30,000 over ask or $40,000 over ask. It's so that we offer just enough more than the next guy so that we can win. And remember when I said earlier there's two different ways you can write the escalation clause? Okay, so the level 1 ninja way to write the escalation clause is by doing what I just said. Buyer agrees to pay $2,000 over next competing offer not to exceed a purchase price of whatever price. The level 9 wizard ninja warrior way to write an escalation clause, it goes like this. And I'm going to do it a little slow because it can be kind of confusing unless it's written out in front of you. Buyer agrees to a purchase price where the seller's net exceeds $2,000 more than the seller's net of the next competing offer. And hopefully you followed me on that one, right? And so the two differences between the offers is that one of the escalation clauses is just raising the contract price or the offer price, and the level 9 wizard ninja warrior escalation clause, that one is actually offering to increase the seller's net. So you can be very sneaky with that one. I know I said there was 3 things we did in that offer, but there was actually a 4th thing. And the reason I didn't say 3 in the beginning is because the 4th one is kind of Florida specific. So your state may or may not have this applicable rule, but in Florida, this is how it goes. When you go to write that offer, essentially there's a spot in the contract where you allow the buyer or the seller to elect to pay for the title charges and to pick the title company that they're going to be closing with. And in the state of Florida, at that price point for that house, that charge is about $2,500. And typically the norm is when somebody writes an offer, at least here in this area, they put that the seller picks the title company and picks the closing. Well, in our offer, and this is after a conversation that we had with the buyers, they were very well on cash and they really didn't want to lose this house. So I said, the one last thing we can do to this offer is to elect to pay those title charges and pick the title company. And that's going to put an extra approximately $2,500 net in the seller's pocket compared to what the rest of the offers are probably going to do. So with all those 4 things together, we absolutely crushed, and we got that text message that I love to get. And that is when the listing agent calls me up and says, yep, your offer was accepted and we're ready to move on. And we got it closed. And the buyers are very happy, very solid house. So if you enjoyed that video, make sure you press the thumbs up. I know I haven't been too active on here lately. I've been dealing with a bunch of stuff, but I am not gone. I'm coming back. Have a great day.